Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So we all know these FPL players, your Salahs, your Palmers, your Haalands, players that are likely going to score you a ton of points this season. But what about these players who are maybe a bit cheaper that you don't necessarily know that much about? And when you look at them and try and compare them, all their stats just look the same, and you don't really know who to select and when. Well, you're in luck today because we're going to look at all the players in midfield in FPL who are priced between 6 and 6.5 million. I'm going to compare them using data, and then I'm going to take a bit more of a deep dive into a few selected ones that'll hopefully help you out with your thoughts. If it does and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. We are a small channel trying to grow, and honestly, it does make a massive difference. And I'm super appreciative for all the support we've had so far. So let's take a look at the charts. And what I did here was, like I say, I got all the midfielders priced 6 to 6.5 million and compared their goal contributions and their defensive contributions for last season. So goal contributions, we're talking goals and assists. Offensive contributions, which is new this season, is clearances, blocks, tackles, interceptions, and possession won. So what we've got here is a decent chart that's able to compare them, and I'm going to take Enzo Fernandez, Ismael Sarr, Mikkel Damsgaard, Mohammed Kudus, and Declan Rice and compare them a bit more in depth. So the reason I've picked these five players to look at is A, think they offer a bit of variety. You're not looking at exactly the same type of player or the same type of player that scores similarly in terms of how they get their FPL points. And I also think they play for teams that you could be picking from. You know, these are decent teams who could do well in the Premier League this season. Now, if there are any players on this chart that I'm not talking about today and you want to, know my opinion on them, just pop them in the comments. I'm more than happy to do a video on them as well. You know, there might be an obvious error not to talk about Jacob Murphy, for instance, this season. He's an absolute outlier in this data. And the reason I'm not talking about him is I just think he's not going to do as well this season. Newcastle have a lot of wide attacking options in their squad. You know, they've added in Anthony Elanga. And the reason Jacob Murphy, or one of the reasons he got a lot of returns last season, was because players like Anthony Gordon were either injured or suspended. And that's not a guarantee that that's going to happen again. So I do anticipate his numbers to dip a little bit. And so I didn't want to talk about a player that I didn't genuinely think would be a good option. But like I say, if you want to hear more about players like that, just pop them in the comments and I'll definitely do another video on them. So the first player we're going to look at is Enzo Fernandez. Now, he is someone who, playing for Chelsea, is definitely going to play. You know, he's someone who started 32 games last season, and in a massive Chelsea squad where there seems to be a ton of players that could get rotated, I do think Enzo Fernandez is guaranteed those starts. He's also got really good fixtures to start the season, and that's a key thing when getting in these players because these are players that, whilst you can use free transfers on them, because they're not necessarily going to get attacking returns every game, or they've got quite sort of low point ceilings, they're not going to score you, 3 goals or get 2 assists in a game like someone like a Palmer. The fixtures are important. So having good fixtures for the first 6 games just means you can put him in your team and you kind of just forget about him for a few weeks. And then when the fixtures turn, if they do, and you don't want him anymore, then you can make a transfer on him. Now, some negatives for me is that can you fit him in your team? And what I mean by that is that if you want 3 Chelsea players, is he going to be one of the three? And it kind of links to another negative in the fact that do you even want 3 Chelsea? Because people are talking about Chelsea in a really positive way, and I do think they'll have a good season. But I think for me, if you want a João Pedro, if you want a Palmer, if you want a Moises Caicedo this season with defensive contributions, maybe you want a Robert Sanchez in goal. Well, that's 4, 5, 6 possible Chelsea players. Where does Enzo fit on that list? Well, he's probably down below Palmer. He might even be down beneath Caicedo because Caicedo's a million cheaper and can still get attacking returns. And then, João Pedro as well could easily be put above him and maybe a Chelsea defender. It's also, if you want Caicedo, Palmer, and Enzo Fernandez, that's not only 3 Chelsea players, but 3 Chelsea players in your 5-man midfield. So that is even tighter then to squeeze in players from other teams. So I think in terms of the midfielders for Chelsea, he probably ranks about third. I do think he's still a good option if you did want to go there. So the next player we're going to talk about is Ismael Sarr from Crystal Palace. Now, I think the positives are that Palace have retained a lot of their players. There was talk going into the summer that they might lose Dean Henderson, Matt Gahey, Munoz, Wharton, Eze, Mateta, and they've kept all of them so far. Now, of course, the transfer window is not closed, and that can still change. I think having a consistent squad going into this season, when they did really well last season, is only going to be a good thing. Another plus is that he got 15 returns in 30 starts last season. That's great. Like we said, these players aren't going to be the players who are scoring you points every week. You have to kind of keep it in perspective when you're looking at players at this price. Otherwise, they'd be priced at 8.5 million above. So, whilst they can get returns, not an expectation, and they might even end up on your bench some weeks. So, the fact that he is getting consistent returns every other game is a huge bonus here. The negatives for me, however, is that he's got low bonus point potential. So the bonus points, at the end of every game, you can get one, two, or three bonus points depending on your performance. Mikkel Sarr actually ranked 25th out of all midfielders for bonus points last season. He got 15. So he's not someone who's going to get you a huge points haul. That's someone like maybe an Eze, maybe a Mateta, players who seem to have more of a direct impact on bonus points when they're playing. Those are the players from Palace that you'd want to get in. But he is someone that's maybe going to keep you ticking over and just get you an assist or a goal, and that would be it. Another thing is European football for Crystal Palace. So that's a point of contention as to which competition they're in at the moment. But assuming they are in a European competition, which will be happening, it just depends which one. Does that feed into their performances on the pitch? And does that mean that Ismail Sarr maybe starts a little less this season? Well, I don't anticipate him to start less at the start of the season or in the first half, but it is something that could feed in depending on how well they do later in the year. So the next player we're going to look at is Mikkel Damsgaard from Brentford. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, Brentford, they've sold Mbumo, they've sold Norgard. How are they, going to form this season? Well, I think there still is potential for them to do quite well, even with Thomas Frank leaving. Now, the positives for someone like Damsgaard is that he's cheaper than the rest of the midfielders that we're talking about. He's only 6 million. And zero point 0.5 million, I feel like, does go a long way this season with the way they've priced players in FPL. I think having that extra zero point 0.5 million really does help. I also think that someone has to get points for Brentford. Even if they sell someone like Visser, Brentford aren't going to go scoreless this season in the Premier League. Someone will score goals, someone will assist goals. And I think Damsgaard is one of those players that could step up. When these good players leave, it's like, oh, we've sold our two best players. Well, then you're going to have two new best players this season, aren't you? Someone is going to be your next best player. Someone's going to score you those points. So I do think it's interesting to get someone like a Damsgaard in. I also quite like Brentford's fixtures here. I know Nottingham Forest away maybe isn't the easiest game at the start of the season, but Forest kind of did tail off a bit last season. They were a bit of a momentum team. You look back at when teams like Leicester won the Premier League and then they just fell off the following season. You don't really know how Forest are going to be, and all it takes is one result to sort of go Brentford's way, and then everything from the summer is kind of forgotten, and the players become an option again. So he is someone you could get in ahead of that schedule. The negatives for me is, of course, they have sold a lot of players, so you can't just spin it in the fact that, oh, they've sold players and they're going to be amazing. Like, there is the possibility, of course, that there's too much team disruption. But there is the chance that because they've sold players, they do get players in, and they are a good team at looking at, good players, good managers to get in, and then just kind of keep the consistency. So I don't anticipate them to have a disaster season. But of course, it's a risk getting in a player for a team where there's a lot of turnover. I think as well there's not enough goals from Damsgaard. He only got two last season, so his goal threat is down. He did get 10 assists though, which ranked pretty highly overall in the Premier League, and I think is a good amount. So those 12 attacking returns last season is really good. He also ranked quite highly on defensive metrics as well, so it's interesting to see how that plays in FPL. But having a midfielder who can rank highly on both sides of the ball, attacking and defensive, can only be a positive for your team. So the next up is Mohammed Kudus, and someone who is a really interesting pick. The positives are that it's a new team and a new system because he didn't do that great last season. And he is one of those players that you look at and you think he's so inconsistent. He got 5 goals and 4 assists in 31 starts last season. That's not a lot. 9 attacking returns. It's okay, but he's someone that you can see having a bit more of an explosiveness in Spurs. Thomas Frank has got him in, and can he be like the next Mbumo for Spurs, cutting in from the right hand side? Possibly. Be interesting to see, and it'd be even more interesting to see at the start of the season because of these good fixtures. Now, he is someone who's likely to get score points in bursts. We talk about players with sort of low ceilings and maybe not going to get you those big points hauls. Mohamed Kudus is someone who could get you big points return, especially early at home, first game of the season. Would you be surprised if he got a goal and assist in that game and then all of a sudden everyone's rushing to get him in? That Man City game might look a little bit tough, but Man City aren't impossible to score goals against. So I do think the fixtures at the start of the season play into this. Get him in for those first 6 games. If it's not working, you can always transfer him out again, but the upside is there. For me, the negatives are the poor form last season, but is that now irrelevant if he's playing for Spurs? Is that a West Ham thing because West Ham was so poor last season? Now he's in a different environment with a fresh start. Can he then turn it around? He is a little bit of a risky pick and kind of feeds into him being just this unknown quantity. So someone like an Enzo Fernandez or an Ismael Sarr or a Damsgaard, you maybe know a little bit more of what you're going to get from them week in, week out. Mohamed Kudus is one of those players that is a bit of a fun pick, but also a bit of a risky pick in terms of how brave are you feeling in your team selection. Could pay off, but could also backfire a little bit. But at 6.5 million, it's not like you've spent a lot of money on there. This could be one of those players where you go a little bit differential and you think, I'm going to get him in and try and just get that edge over other averages. So the final player we're going to talk about is Declan Rice. And positives for me, he's guaranteed to play, a bit like Enzo Fernandez. You look at the Arsenal players that we've brought in, and it looks like they're getting in Gyökeres. They've got Havertz coming in from injury. They've got Saka coming back from injury. They've got Madueke in. They've got Nwaneri. They've got Martinelli. They've got Trossard. And if you're looking at one of those Arsenal attacking players, you're going to be thinking, are they starting each week? Are they going to be rotated out? Declan Rice, and someone who, plays so much, is guaranteed to start every week. So you don't have that headache about minutes. I also think that because he's on some set pieces, that really does put him over the top of a lot of other centre midfielders. That's how he gets some of these assists from taking corners. We know that Arsenal are quite good at set pieces. And we also can see him scoring some free kicks as well. Now, the downside, of course, is that there's tough fixtures here. Liverpool away, Man City, and Newcastle away. They're not easy fixtures, but we kind of think of that as a bad thing. But if we're looking at now defensive contributions for midfielders, well, you do want in these defensive midfielders or these box to box midfielders like Declan Rice when they're playing more difficult teams because that's when they have to win possession back. That's when they have to recover the ball, put tackles in, clearances, interceptions. And that's when they'll get those 2 extra points. I also think it's not completely out of the realm that Arsenal get something at Liverpool away. The pre-season sort of narrative is that Liverpool are going to walk the Premier League. And I always think, well, what if they don't? How many times do you make a prediction for a football game and you're wrong? And it happens all the time, right? So it's what if Arsenal do go to Liverpool in game 3 and they do win or they get a draw? And all of a sudden, the narrative changes to, oh, Liverpool are not starting strong, Arsenal are going to win the league. So I just think you have to keep an open mind in terms of which players you go for and their actual possibilities in football. And finally, Declan Rice, he does just have a bit of a low ceiling. So when we say low ceiling, what I mean is that he's not going to get you those points hauls like someone like Palmer is, where he's not going to turn up and get you 2 goals and assist in a game. He's probably just going to keep you ticking over. 4 goals in a Premier League season last season is not a lot. Then at 6.5 million, you can't expect him to get much more. So hopefully this video has helped you out with your thoughts a little bit further. If it has, please do subscribe, like the video. Like I said at the start, it really is appreciated. Why not go check out some of my other videos as well? Links will be on the screen right about now. I've also got a video coming out tomorrow, which is a draft with no Salah and no Haaland in it, which links into what we're saying about keeping an open mind in football and in FPL. And go join the mini league as well. Link will be in the title. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully, you've had a good week, and I will see you in the next one.